My name is Marcus Thorne, and I live in a quiet cul-de-sac in Pataskala, Ohio, a small town about 20 minutes east of Columbus that most people have never heard of. I am 37 years old. I work as a claims adjuster for a mid-sized insurance company, and until 6 months ago, I believed I understood the basic mechanics of how the world worked. My wife, Elena, and I bought our house on Sycamore Court 3 years ago, primarily because of the excellent school district and the way the afternoon sun turned the backyard golden through the kitchen windows. We have a daughter named Lily, who just turned 5 in March, and she is, or was, the kind of child who laughed at everything, who collected smooth stones from the backyard like they were precious gems, who spoke in that particular high-pitched lisp that children develop before their adult teeth arrive. She was ordinary in all the ways that matter, which is to say she was perfectly, beautifully ordinary. The first sign appeared on a Tuesday in late October, during the last week of daylight saving time, when the darkness comes earlier and the house feels different in that gray hour between dinner and bed. I was in the kitchen washing dishes while Elena was upstairs helping Lily get ready for bath, and we heard it, a sound that stopped both of us in our tracks, Elena calling down from the top of the stairs, her voice strange and tight. "Marcus, come here, come upstairs now." When I arrived in the hallway outside Lily's bedroom, Elena stood frozen in the doorway, one hand pressed against her mouth, and Lily sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor surrounded by the crayons she should have been putting away. But she wasn't drawing the rainbow horses or the scribbled suns she usually favored. She was drawing something else entirely, a dark, spiraling shape that seemed to pulse even on paper, and she was making a sound, a low humming that rose and fell in a pattern that had nothing to do with any melody I had ever heard. When I said her name, she looked up at me with eyes that seemed, just for a moment, to belong to someone else entirely, and she spoke a single word in a language I couldn't identify. A language that felt like ice water running down my spine. It wasn't English. It wasn't Spanish, which Elena speaks to her sometimes. It wasn't any baby talk garble or childhood mispronunciation I had heard before. It was something else, something that shouldn't have been possible coming from the mouth of a 5-year-old who had never left Ohio. We told ourselves it was nothing, a fever dream, a random collection of sounds that meant nothing, a child's imagination running wild in that strange hour when daylight fails. Elena suggested it might be a song from a cartoon, something we'd somehow missed, and I wanted to believe her because the alternative was too frightening to hold in my mind for longer than a few seconds at a time. But over the following weeks, the drawings multiplied like something living, spreading across the walls of Lily's bedroom in colors that seemed darker than they should have been, in shapes that suggested architecture that belonged to no city I had ever seen. She drew towers that twisted upward in impossible geometries, buildings that seemed to breathe with a slow, terrible rhythm, and in every single drawing, there were figures, tall, thin figures with limbs too long and joints too sharp, standing in clusters like crowds waiting for something to begin. Elena began washing them off the walls every morning, but Lily would start again almost immediately, her small hand moving in movements that looked mechanical, automatic, as if she were simply transcribing something she had already seen rather than creating it for the first time. The language grew more complex too. Where there had been single words, now there were strings of sound, phrases that rose and fell in patterns that reminded me uncomfortably of prayer or incantation, spoken in that same hollow voice that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her small chest should have been able to contain. She would speak it while eating breakfast, while watching television, while playing with her toys. And when we asked her what she was saying, she would stop immediately and look at us with an expression of perfect, innocent confusion that seemed genuine, but also somehow performed. She started drawing things that frightened her, she said, but when we asked her what was in the pictures, she could only describe them in ways that didn't match what we were seeing. "The tall ones are coming," she told me one evening while I was putting her to bed, her voice steady and strange, and utterly unlike the daughter I had known for 5 years, and she pressed one small finger against the window, as if pointing at something in the darkness outside. "They've been waiting a long time. They're almost done waiting now." When I looked where she was pointing, there was nothing there, just the backyard, the trees, the stars beginning to emerge in the October sky. But I felt, with a certainty that made my stomach lurch, that something had looked back at us from that window just moments before. The first prediction came true on November 15th, and I cannot think about it without feeling my hands start to shake, without feeling my breath catch in my throat like something is physically blocking it. Lily had been drawing the same image for 3 days in a row. A large building with windows that glowed red against a gray sky, surrounded by black shapes that might have been people, or might have been something else entirely. We had tried to stop her, had hidden her crayons, had bribed her with promises of ice cream and trips to the zoo, but she would find ways to draw it anyway, using mud from the backyard, using lipstick she had taken from Elena's drawer, using her own finger dipped in the blood from a scraped knee she had gotten at preschool. When I asked her what she was drawing, she told me in that flat, affectless voice that the building was going to fall down and take the people inside with it. 2 days later, the Champlain Tower South collapsed in Surfside, Florida, killing 98 people, and when I saw the news footage, I recognized every line of that building, as if I had seen it before, in a dream I couldn't quite remember. We took her to doctors, to specialists, to a child psychologist named Dr. Ashford, who had degrees from Yale and Johns Hopkins, and 20 years of experience that should have meant something, but didn't. They found nothing wrong with her. Her brain scans showed nothing unusual. Her blood tests were clean. She was, by every medical measure available, a perfectly healthy 5-year-old girl with no reason to be drawing architectural prophecies on her bedroom walls or speaking in tongues that no linguist could identify. Dr. Ashford suggested it might be a form of complex imaginative play, but I saw the way his eyes narrowed when Lily looked at him, the way his hand trembled slightly when she spoke her strange words at him, and I knew he didn't believe his own explanation for a single second. He referred us to a specialist in Boston who worked with children who had unusual abilities, but the appointment wouldn't come until January, and by then I had stopped believing we would still need it. Something was coming. Something was always coming, and Lily could see it before the rest of us because she was already, somehow, already there. The second prediction arrived in the second week of December in the form of a drawing that showed a great bird made of smoke and fire falling from the sky toward a building with a cross on top of it. Lily drew it with a new kind of urgency, her whole body shaking as she pressed crayon to paper, and when I asked her what it meant, she said something was going to break open in the sky, and the sky was going to cry black tears that would put out the fires, but start something worse. I searched the news obsessively for weeks, trying to find any hint of what she might be predicting, but I found nothing, and I began to hope that maybe this time she was wrong. Maybe this time the vision wouldn't come true. Then December 21st arrived, and COVID-19 variant Omicron was sweeping through the population like a wildfire. and hospitals were overflowing, and the phrase "black tears" suddenly made a terrible, horrible kind of sense. The pandemic was still killing people, still breaking open families, still turning the sky into something that wept without ceasing, and my daughter had known it was coming months before we did. By Christmas, we had painted over the drawings so many times that the walls of Lily's bedroom had developed a texture like scar tissue, thick with layers of primer and latex that couldn't quite contain whatever was bleeding through. We had tried everything: counseling, medication, simply waiting for Lily to outgrow whatever this was. But nothing worked. She kept drawing, kept speaking, kept watching us with those eyes that seemed to see through walls and time and the comfortable fiction of normalcy we had built our lives around. I stopped sleeping more than 2 or 3 hours at a stretch. Elena had moved into the guest bedroom, not because we were fighting, but because she said she couldn't bear to lie next to me anymore, couldn't bear to hear me wake up gasping from the dreams that had started plaguing me. Dreams where I stood in impossible buildings and watched impossible things fall from impossible skies. We had become strangers living in the same house, connected only by our shared terror and our shared daughter, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Lily was watching us, studying us, waiting to see what we would do next before revealing what came next in her terrible sequence of prophecies. It was January 8th when Lily drew the thing that finally broke me, the image that made me understand we were not dealing with anything that could be explained by psychology or medicine or any rational framework I had ever been taught to trust. She drew it in the middle of the night, while Elena and I slept in separate rooms, while the house sat silent and still around us, like a held breath waiting to be released. When I came downstairs the next morning, I found her sitting in the living room with the drawing spread across the coffee table, and she was crying, not the frustrated tears of a child denied something, but the quiet, steady tears of someone who has seen too much and understood too clearly what they have seen. The drawing showed our house, our actual house, rendered with a precision that made my stomach lurch and my vision blur at the edges. And around it, surrounding it, covering the lawn and the driveway and the street beyond in a tide of dark, shapeless figures that seemed to be flowing toward our front door like water finding its level. I asked her what it meant, and she looked up at me with those ancient, impossible eyes, and she spoke in a voice that wasn't hers, a voice that was deeper and colder and full of something that might have been sorrow, or might have been hunger, or might have been both at once. She said they were coming now. She said they had been here before and would be here again. She said the house was just a door, and the door had been open for a very long time. She said her name was not Lily, had never been Lily, had only been wearing that name like a coat she would take off when the time was right. She said the drawings were not predictions, but memories. Memories of things that had happened before and would happen again, because time was not what we thought it was, and space was not what we believed, and the walls between what was and what would be were thinner than we could imagine. I don't remember what happened next clearly. There was a sound like the house itself was breathing in, and the lights flickered, and when I looked at the window, I saw something standing in the backyard. Just a figure, just a shape, just a darkness that stood where the darkness shouldn't have been. And then it was gone, and I was holding Lily in my arms, and she was just Lily again, just my daughter, just a 5-year-old who didn't remember anything she had said, who was crying and asking why I was holding her so tight, who didn't know that I had seen the drawings she would make tomorrow, or the day after, or the week after that. Drawings of things I couldn't yet identify, but knew, with a certainty that lived in my bones, would come true just like the others had come true. I called the specialist in Boston and demanded an earlier appointment. I was told nothing was available until March. I hung up the phone and went to check on Lily, who was playing quietly in her room, and I found her standing at her window, looking out at something I couldn't see. And when she turned to me, her smile was wrong in a way I couldn't define, but felt in every nerve of my body. This is the part of the story I'm not sure I should be writing. The part that makes me wonder if any of this is really true, or if I've finally broken under the weight of what I witnessed and what I still witness every single day. Lily hasn't made any more predictions since January. The drawings have stopped, or at least they've stopped being about specific disasters, specific buildings, specific moments of destruction and grief. Now she draws the same thing over and over. A door, just a door, standing alone in darkness. And sometimes the door is open and sometimes it's closed, but it's always there, always waiting, always promising something on the other side that I cannot allow myself to imagine. She speaks in English now, normal 5-year-old English about toys and cartoons and the friend she wants to have over for a play date. She is, by every measure, just a child again. But last night, I heard her talking in her sleep, speaking in that language I still can't identify no matter how many times I listen to the recordings I've made. And what she said in that hollow, terrible voice, was a single phrase that I've been trying to translate ever since. She said, "The door is open. We have always been inside. They have always been waiting." When I went to check on her, she was awake, sitting up in bed, and she was looking directly at me with those eyes that belonged to someone else. And she said in her own voice, my daughter's voice, but somehow not, "Don't worry, Daddy, it's almost over." And then it starts again. I pulled her into my arms and held her until the sun came up. And when the light finally arrived, she was just Lily again, confused and sleepy, and asking if it was time for breakfast. But I know now what I didn't know before, what I couldn't have known until I saw it with my own eyes. The predictions weren't predictions at all. They were announcements. And the announcement said that we had already passed the point of no return, that something was already here, that the house we live in was never just a house, that our daughter was never just our daughter, and that every drawing, every word, every moment of horror was just the beginning of something that had started a very long time ago and would never, ever end.